We've all felt it, haven't we? That chill that has nothing to do with the cold. A primal fear of places that have been left to rot. Places that have seen too much suffering to ever truly be at peace. And there's no place more haunted by that feeling than an abandoned hospital. The empty hallways, the shattered windows, the rusted gurneys, they all hold echoes. Echoes of pain, of fear, and sometimes of something much, much worse. Tonight we have 4 true stories from the shadows of these forgotten institutions. Listen closely. Story 1. The Last Patient. My first story comes from a man named Leo. He and his friends, Mark and Sarah, were avid urban explorers. Their ultimate goal was the old Ravenswood Memorial Hospital, a massive, decaying building that had been closed since the 1980s, after a series of questionable patient deaths. They waited for a moonless night. The chain-link fence was easy to cut through, and a basement window provided a dark entrance. The air inside was thick and stale, smelling of mold and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. Leo's flashlight beam danced across a long hallway. Rooms filled with broken furniture and scattered medical files lined the walls. It was dead silent, except for the crunch of their own footsteps on broken glass. Sarah, who was filming with her camera, suddenly stopped. "Did you guys hear that?" They all froze. From deep within the building they heard a slow, rhythmic sound. Squeak, drag, squeak, drag. It was the unmistakable sound of a gurney being wheeled down a hallway. Mark laughed nervously. "It's just the wind, man. Pushing a loose wheel or something." They pressed on, deeper into the heart of the hospital, towards the old surgical ward. But the sound didn't stop. Squeak, drag, squeak, drag. It was getting closer. And now, they started to hear another sound underneath it. A low, wet, gurgling breath. Panic began to set in. They turned a corner, and Leo's flashlight illuminated a set of rusty elevator doors. And there, standing in front of them, was a figure. It was tall and impossibly thin, draped in a stained patient gown. Its skin was pale and waxy, and its head was tilted at a broken angle. But the worst part was its eyes. They were wide, milky white, and completely unblinking. The figure raised a bony finger and pointed directly at them. A wet, choking whisper filled the hallway. "It's time for my medicine." They didn't wait. They ran. They sprinted back through the maze of hallways, the sound of the squeaking gurney and that horrible gurgling breath echoing behind them, seeming to come from every direction at once. They finally burst out of the basement window and into the cold night air, not stopping until they were safely back in their car, hearts pounding. As they caught their breath, Sarah, pale as a ghost, looked down at her camera. She had kept it running the whole time. On the small screen, in the footage of their frantic escape, just as they passed a dark room, a pale, smiling face was clearly visible in the doorway, watching them flee. They had not been alone in that hallway. They had an audience. Story 2. The Basement Tunnels. Our second story is from a woman named Chloe. Her boyfriend David worked for a company contracted to survey the structural integrity of the abandoned St. Martha's Asylum. The main building was scary enough, but David's job was to check the network of steam tunnels in the basement. Chloe, an amateur photographer, begged to come along to take pictures of the eerie architecture. David reluctantly agreed, on the condition she stayed close. The basement was another world. It was colder, the air damp and heavy. The only light came from their headlamps, cutting through a darkness so complete it felt solid. The tunnels were a labyrinth of rusted pipes and grimy brick walls. The sound of dripping water was constant. Chloe was taking photos when she saw it. A child's handprint, clear as day, on a dusty pipe. Then another, and another. A trail of them leading down a side tunnel. "David, look at this," she whispered, her voice trembling. David shone his light. "It's probably just from other explorers. kids messing around. But as they followed the main tunnel, Chloe kept hearing things. Not just drips. It was a soft, shuffling sound, and then a faint, high-pitched giggle that seemed to bounce off the tunnel walls. David claimed he couldn't hear it. They reached a large, circular room with multiple tunnel exits. In the center was an old, stained mattress. That's when Chloe's headlamp flickered and died. A moment later, David's did the same. They were plunged into a blackness so absolute it felt suffocating. And in that silence, the giggling returned. It was right next to Chloe's ear. She felt a small, cold hand slip into hers. She screamed and yanked her hand back, fumbling for her phone. She turned on the flashlight, swinging it wildly around the room. It was empty. David was staring at her, terrified. "We need to go. Now," he said. They ran, using the phone's light, following their string markers back to the entrance. They never looked back. When they got to the surface, both of their headlamps worked perfectly. It wasn't until days later, when Chloe was reviewing her photos, that she found it. A picture she didn't remember taking. It was a close-up, blurry shot of the tunnel wall. And pressed against the grimy bricks, as if hiding, was the pale, smiling face of a little girl, her eyes black and hollow. She hadn't been running from them. She had been trying to play. Story 3. The Static in the Silence. This story involves two brothers, Jake and Ryan. They were ghost hunters, armed with digital recorders and EMF meters. Their target was the abandoned Brookhaven General, a place notorious for EVP, electronic voice phenomena. They set up in the old maternity ward on the 5th floor. The moment they entered, the air grew cold. Their EMF meters spiked randomly for no reason. Ryan decided to do a solo EVP session in one of the delivery rooms while Jake monitored from the hallway. Ryan began asking questions into the silence. "Is there anyone here with us?" Static crackled faintly from his recorder. "What is your name?" More static, this time forming a harsh, whispering sound that almost sounded like, "Leave." Ryan, feeling brave, pressed on. "Why are you still here?" The silence that followed was heavier than before. Then, the door to the room slammed shut with such force the wall shook. Jake yelled from the hallway, but Ryan was trapped inside. Inside the room, the temperature plummeted. Ryan's breath came out in white puffs. And then a voice, clear as day, came not from the recorder, but from the corner of the room. It was the frantic, terrified voice of a woman. "Where is my baby? What did you do with my baby?" Ryan scrambled for the door, yanking it open and stumbling out into the hallway where a panicked Jake was waiting. They didn't stop to pack their equipment. They just ran. When they got home and calmed down, they reviewed the recording from the recorder Ryan had left in the room. For a few minutes after he fled, there was only silence. Then a new voice, deep and guttural, whispered a single sentence into the microphone. "I have him." They never went back. They had gone looking for a ghost, but they found something far more sinister. A conversation trapped in time, a mother's despair, and the entity that answered her. Story 4. The Night Shift. Our final story comes from a security guard named Ben. He was hired for a single overnight shift at the soon-to-be-demolished Fairview Medical Center. His job was simple: walk the premises every 2 hours and make sure no vandals had gotten in. The first patrol was uneventful. The second, around 2 a.m., felt different. As Ben walked the third-floor neurology wing, his radio suddenly erupted with a burst of static and a frantic overlapping chorus of voices. "Code Blue, room 304. Nurse, I need help. The pain. Make it stop." It lasted only a second, then cut back to silent static. Ben's blood ran cold. He called into dispatch. "Hey, did you just broadcast that?" The dispatcher replied, confused. "Broadcast what? Your channel's been quiet all night." Shaken, Ben continued his rounds. On his next pass through the main lobby, he saw her. A nurse in an old-fashioned white uniform standing at the front desk, her back to him. She was perfectly still. "Ma'am?" "This is a restricted area," Ben said, his voice echoing in the vast space. The nurse didn't move. He took a step closer. "Ma'am, you can't be in here." Slowly, she began to turn. But she didn't stop. Her head kept rotating, a full 180 degrees, until she was looking directly at him, her body still facing the desk. Her face was waxy and serene, but her eyes were pools of utter blackness. She smiled, a wide, impossibly long smile. "My shift isn't over," she whispered. Ben didn't need to be told twice. He ran out of the building, got in his car, and quit his job over the phone the next morning. He later learned that during a fire in the 1970s, a dedicated night shift nurse had refused to leave her post, ensuring all her patients were evacuated. She died of smoke inhalation, right there at the front desk. She was just doing her job, and according to her, she still is. 4 stories from the hollowed-out shells of healing, now places of pure dread. The echoes of pain, the shadows of the past, they don't just fade away. Sometimes they stay, and sometimes they notice you. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.